Before the UFC became a global empire, one TV show kept it alive. Now it's barely breathing.
That first season, it was unbelievable. We were the hottest show on the network.
In the early 2000s, the UFC was running out of time until one fight changed everything. That night didn't just save the company, it made the UFC mainstream.
Then Forrest and Stephan Bonnar come out in the main event and just start going.
But 2 decades later, the formula that built the empire doesn't work anymore, because while The Ultimate Fighter made the UFC, Dana White's Contender Series replaced it.
But the truth is, nothing killed The Ultimate Fighter quicker than Contender Series.
And for the first time ever, the UFC's own creation might be the reason its show failed. Before the UFC became a billion-dollar powerhouse, it was hanging by a thread.
I got into a huge battle with the old owner of the UFC named Bob Meyerowitz, who's from New York. Basically, we're battling over Tita's contract, and he flips out at me one day and says, you know what? There is no more money. This is it. I don't even know if I have enough money to put on one more event. And I was like, oh, I called Lorenzo, and I said, you know what? The UFC's in trouble. I'll bet we could buy it, and I think we should. So I connected him and Lorenzo Fertitta, who was, the Fertitta brothers were my longtime partners in the UFC. And he got on the phone with Meyerowitz, and I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months later, we owned the company for $2 million.
In the early 2000s, mixed martial arts wasn't the global spectacle it is today. It was messy. Fights were banned in multiple states. Sponsors wouldn't touch it, and the Fertitta brothers were bleeding cash trying to keep the lights on. Pay-per-view sales were tanking, and public opinion saw MMA as barbaric cage fighting, not a sport. That's when Dana White made his biggest gamble, not inside the octagon, but on television.
So Spike TV, we put up the $10 million and we launched The Ultimate Fighter. The Ultimate Fighter fucking takes
Immediately?
Off. Yeah, immediately. By episode 5, we're pulling such massive fucking numbers.
What they created was a new kind of reality show, The Ultimate Fighter. 16 unknown fighters moved into a house, trained together, fought each other, and lived under constant surveillance. It was part Survivor, part Rocky, and part pure chaotic. The timing couldn't have been better. Reality television was dominating the early 2000s, and Dana knew how to turn drama into marketing that even the fighters found themselves in thrilling positions.
What is it like? I mean, honestly, was it intimidating walking to that gym? You got 16 fighters, 2 coaches, who all want to fight you and beat you.
Yeah, it's like the first day in high school. Everybody's looking at me like, want to whoop me. So, first walking in there, I'm glad that day's done and we've already filmed it. It was very nerve-wracking because all these guys wanted to fight me, and I was like, don't be mad at me. Y'all just mad at each other. Y'all about to fight each other right now. So, hello, have a good day, and I left. So it's awesome.
The show gave fans something MMA had never offered before: personalities. You didn't just see knockouts. You saw rivalries, breakdowns, friendships, and hunger. Viewers suddenly cared about these fighters, not just as athletes, but as people. Stephan Bonnar versus Forrest Griffin. 3 rounds of relentless, bloody warfare that no one could look away from. It was raw and electric. When the bell finally rang, everyone watching knew they'd seen something historic. Dana White later said the fight saved the UFC, and he wasn't exaggerating. The ratings exploded. Spike TV immediately ordered another season. Millions of new fans tuned in. For the first time, MMA had broken through to the mainstream.
Then Forrest and Stephan Bonnar come out in the main event and just start going
Crazy.
Toe to toe, knock down, drag them out. The people are stomping their feet in the arena. It sounds like a train's going through the place. It goes right to the decision. They read off the scorecards. Forrest Griffin narrow inches it out and wins the fight. I give them both a contract. Place is going crazy. Oh, by the way, the crowd is chanting one more round, all this shit. And during that, it was like 3 to 4 minutes of that fight. So this is before computers, this is before social media, all that shit. People are picking up their phones, calling their friends, going, are you watching this fight right now on Spike TV?
Suddenly, the UFC was a cultural phenomenon. The fighters from that show became stars. Dana White became the face of the sport, and The Ultimate Fighter helped establish a new model for developing talent. In one season, the UFC went from losing money to printing it, from banned in states to sold-out arenas, from underground to unstoppable. Because when Dana White gambled on reality TV, he basically reinvented it. When The Ultimate Fighter debuted, it was a last gamble to save the UFC.
The Ultimate Fighter, which was the greatest star building
show and format of all time.
Each episode ended not with an argument, but with a sanctioned fight that actually counted. That's what made it different. While other reality shows thrived on stage drama, The Ultimate Fighter gave audiences something real: ambition, struggle, and the threat of being knocked out in front of millions.
That first season, it was unbelievable. We were the hottest show on the network, and I couldn't even, if I showed up, they would meet with me. If I called, I couldn't get them on the phone. It was nuts. So, you know, it was obviously a very stressful time, because everything was riding on that, and so much stuff that went on.
The timing couldn't have been better. Reality TV was peaking, and viewers were already hooked onto chaos of shows like The Apprentice and Survivor. But this was rawer, because the tension was physical. Fighters lived together, trained together, and eventually had to beat each other for a shot at the UFC. The drama came from ambition colliding with survival. Forrest Griffin, Diego Sanchez, Kenny Florian, they entered as unknowns and left as stars. The audience connected not because they were polished personalities, but because they were desperate fighters who felt real. As the seasons rolled on, the formula refined itself. Training montages, locker room tension, Dana White's surprise visits, it all became part of the brand. And every season ended the same way: two fighters stepping into the cage, knowing the result could change their lives forever. By the second season and beyond, the show was introducing fighters who would go on to play significant roles in the UFC's following years.
The phrase, the bigger they are, the harder they fall, doesn't really apply here. We're both two huge men, and I can guarantee from this fight that you're going to see one hell of a knockdown brawl.
Each new cast brought rivalries that carried over into pay-per-view events, keeping the momentum going long after the credits rolled. But maybe the biggest star The Ultimate Fighter created wasn't even a fighter, it was Dana White himself. The show made him the visible, unfiltered voice of the UFC, walking into gyms, making big calls, cutting fighters on camera. His presence turned the UFC from a niche fight league into a mainstream story. By the end of its early run, The Ultimate Fighter had done more than build a roster. It built a culture. A generation of fans grew up watching fighters rise from obscurity to stardom, and the UFC became the fastest growing sport on TV. For a moment, The Ultimate Fighter was the UFC's identity. At first, The Ultimate Fighter felt unstoppable, a factory that kept producing stars and moments the UFC could replay forever.
Stop. Please stop. I can't let you get close. Can you hear my Stop.
But every machine runs out of fuel. As the seasons piled up, the formula that once felt unpredictable started to look rehearsed. The shouting matches, the house pranks, the post-fight tears, what once looked raw now felt like a checklist. After a while, every new season started blending into the last. Same setup, same rivalries, just different faces. Even the fighters began to treat the show less like a proving ground and more like a formality, a long road to the contract they could have earned faster somewhere else. Reality TV was fading too. Viewers were moving on from the locked-in-a-house concept that had dominated the early 2000s. They didn't want drama stretched across 12 episodes. They wanted action in 12 minutes. So then came the shift.
You look at these fights on paper and you think you know how they're gonna go, but you never really do. That's the sport.
Dana White's Contender Series landed like a reset button. No house, no confessionals, no alcohol-fueled arguments. Just fights. 4 matchups per night, 1 chance to impress the boss, and a contract if you delivered something special. For fans, it was exactly what they'd been craving. Quick, clean, and packed with highlights. Instead of watching months of build-up, they could see careers change in a single round.
Essa oportunidade de participar do Contender vai mostrar toda a dedicação do meu trabalho. Vai ser, como eu digo, o prêmio de uma vida toda trabalhando para isso, e eu vou conquistar esse contrato e realizar
Slowly, the viewership started drifting. Tough's numbers slipped season after season, while Contender Series clips dominated social feeds. You didn't need to tune in weekly anymore. The knockouts were already waiting on Instagram. Inside the UFC, focus shifted too. The new generation of fighters didn't grow up watching Tough. They grew up watching Contender Series. And to them, that was the real path to the UFC. Pure competition, not reality TV. By the time The Ultimate Fighter hit its 30th season, it wasn't the launching pad it used to be. Years later, the UFC decided it wasn't ready to bury The Ultimate Fighter. Not yet. The show that built the company still had name value, and Dana White wasn't letting it fade quietly. So the revival began. Big names were brought in: Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, Chael Sonnen, Daniel Cormier, legends meant to reignite old magic.
It's all said and done. These two are going to face off in what is sure to be one of the biggest fights in UFC history.
The format stayed the same with 2 coaches, 2 teams, 1 house, and 1 shot at a contract. But something had changed. The mess that once felt authentic now looked like nostalgia. The trash talk felt staged, the rivalries forced. Even Conor, in all his volatility, couldn't save the formula. Fans tuned in expecting fireworks. Instead, they got deja vu. Viewership reflected it fast. The McGregor vs. Chandler season premiered strong, but dropped by nearly half before the finale. Younger fans didn't have the same attachment to the show that built the UFC 20 years ago. They didn't care about who shared a house. They cared about knockouts, short clips, viral moments, and those came from Contender Series, not The Ultimate Fighter. Dana himself shifted focus, hyping Contender Series weeks more than he did the entire tough seasons. What used to be appointment television had turned into background noise.
Nothing killed The Ultimate Fighter quicker than Contender Series, and for good reason. It became obsolete once the Contender Series. I've long said, like, I think the Contender Series is a brilliant thing. It's one of the best. The Contender Series and Apex, peanut butter and jelly. They were 2 of the most brilliant things that the UFC came up with over the past 8 or so years.
For many fans, it signaled the official end of the Ultimate Fighter era, a clear message that the UFC's future now belonged to a faster, more modern format.
Contender Series, great. It's going to Paramount. That makes all the sense in the world. Do they just throw, Tough on there because for some reason Dana White just doesn't want to let it die? I guess. I thought it was going to die in the ESPN era. You'll recall the first 2-3 years of the ESPN era, Tough didn't exist. It was pretty much dead, and then all of a sudden it reemerged. I don't think that there is any value in it whatsoever.
He wasn't wrong. The Contender Series became the new heartbeat of UFC recruitment. Fresh fighters, no drama, instant contracts. And when Paramount began discussions to expand Dana White's Contender Series into a mainstream platform, it felt like the final chapter had been written. For nearly 2 decades, The Ultimate Fighter had been the UFC's miracle machine, the show that saved the sport and built its legends. But in a world that now rewards speed over story, it was no longer the future, it was the foundation. And just like the fighters it once made famous, it had done its job and handed the spotlight to the next generation. And speaking of tough decisions, if you want to see what happens when someone tries to outsmart the UFC for a bigger payday, make sure to watch this video next.